Recently, I rewatched Batwoman Season 1. Why? I have no idea. I really don't know. But full transparency, full honesty here, it wasn't that bad. Now, granted, understand that I'm not saying this is a great show. What I'm saying is I didn't regret watching the show. It's got some decent moments, but there's a lot of things wrong, and if they would have made a couple of tweaks here and there with certain characters, certain storylines, I think this season would have been maybe overall appreciated more by the people watching the show when it actually started airing. As I said in the intro, this is a rewatch of the first season because I actually watched the show live when it first aired years ago on the CW. So if you guys want to see all my reactions to Batwoman Season 1, they are on the channel. Go check them out if you guys want to. So going through this rewatch, I remembered most of the episodes, most of the characters, most of the storylines. There were a couple of times I was confused on what exactly was happening because I don't remember it happening that way or at all. And then eventually started to click like, oh yeah, I do remember that. Just didn't click right away. The things that were not so great in the first viewing of it live when it was airing week to week on the CW still are happening in the rewatch. And the things that actually worked or was okay, not terrible, for first initial watch, same thing here with the rewatch in terms of everything was still kind of in place in terms of if it wasn't good the first time, it's still in that area again here in the rewatch years later. Same thing with anything that was good or not so good, but not terrible. So nothing really drastically changed from the first viewing versus now. And so in a way, I guess, quote unquote, the show still holds up, I guess. But it's unfortunate that because this show could have easily been so much better. The one thing that still sticks out from the first live viewing to now years later for the rewatch, the best part about the show is still clearly Beth Kane, aka Alice, the overarching villain of season 1. If it wasn't for all the reveals and the scenes of Alice just in general in this show, I think Batwoman would actually be a way worse viewing experience. Because in my opinion, Alice makes the show. Every time we see her in a scene, it elevates the scene. And sure, at times it could be over the top in terms of the Alice in Wonderland kind of motifs, and the dialogue at times can be a little too much or just kind of corny in a way, but it overall works. And I think it makes it a better viewing experience because of the connection, of course, to Kate Kane. And in speaking of Kate Kane, Ruby Rose. There's a lot of things surrounding her time on the show, after she left the show. What I will say in terms of season 1, because of course her character is heavily tied in, of course she's the lead, but heavily tied into Alice, that dynamic between those two characters work. And Ruby by herself, and then with Alice, as her sister within the show, Ruby playing Kate Kane, it's okay. There is obviously so much more potential she could have delved into with the character. Just talking season 1, I'm not talking potentially what could have happened if she never left the show. But sometimes her acting is very wooden. It doesn't come across as really putting the effort into some of the dialogue or some of the delivery of the lines. And there's times as well where I feel like maybe Ruby could have tried something different there in that scene. We could have tried something else to maybe deliver that scene to make it a little bit better. And I think the way they wrote Kate Kane, it was okay, but they could have easily just tweaked her character a slight bit here and there, and I think it would have been accepted more in terms of her portrayal as the character. And I think it really boils down to the writing of the show. As I've been saying, there's been a lot of stuff that just didn't work. In my opinion, a lot of the other villains within season 1, not talking Alice, like the one-off villains, a lot of them just feel kind of like throwaway kind of villains, or not really developed, or there isn't really much care and attention put into them. It's just oh, they're here. They're just kind of filling a spot because we can't have Alice in every single episode be the main villain. So they're throwing in these random villains that you may recognize from the comics, and they're adapted a certain way, or they're just random characters that are being kind of thrown in. And I feel like that really is hurting the show, because Alice is still around pretty much in every single episode. But when you have another villain that's kind of taking the spotlight, and they're not really developed much at all, or they try to develop them, but it just comes across as kind of last minute. It just doesn't feel like they put a lot of time and effort into it. It really comes across as the writing really isn't helping the show. it's actually deterring and hurting the show. Because what really makes a superhero show work is good or at least interesting, entertaining villains. And in this sense, Alice is the star, essentially, quote unquote, of the show. But with these other villains, a lot of them are just basically underdeveloped, or you don't care that they're around. You're like, oh, it's just another person for Kate Kane as Batwoman to beat up. Like, there's no real care enough to really follow their storyline or what they're doing or what their purpose is. And they try to make you care, but it doesn't work for me personally. And it's unfortunate because that's one of the biggest like things about a superhero show is you need to have villains that are actually good. And if you can't deliver on that, then it really just hurts the episodes overall, and then it means it's hurting the entire season overall. The supporting cast around this show is a mixed bag. I think Luke and Mary are the highlights for sure because they're getting the most screen time and they're getting the most development as characters within season one, and their connection to Kate Kane are obviously very different in terms of the beginning, but as we get closer and closer to ending season one, how the two worlds of Kate Kane are kind of blurring and merging together in terms of Luke with the Batwoman side, Mary with Kate Kane's side, and so the blurring and everything like that going through season one as it getting closer and closer to where it's just overlapped and everything. So I felt like that handling of the storylines and those characters and their involvement with Kate and Batwoman as basically two separate entities worked, and then their individual characters in terms of Luke and Mary work as well. So I think that those pillars in terms of Luke Fox and Mary, in terms of how they worked on the show individually and then together within storylines, I think it really elevated the show. It made it a little bit better. It made it worth watching a little bit more because of their two characters specifically. If we want to dive into Sophie, which is a whole mixed bag for me because the only reason why her character even exists is because of her connection to Kate in the past in terms of their previous relationship. Look, I'm not against Sophie. I'm not against her as a character, not necessarily, but I think the foundation of why she really truly is involved in this series is because she's a former fling or a former girlfriend of Kate Kane. Like, I get it. Romance is something that's going to be a part of a lot of storytelling, but to me, I want more of a reason for her to be a part of the show than just being the girl that Kate used to have a relationship with, and that's the really only reason she's really around. I understand story-wise, well, she became a crow, so she's in Gotham working under Kate's father who's running the crows. I get it. But I wish there was more of a reason for her to actually really be in the show, besides just being an ex at the time to Kate when she comes back to Gotham. The more I thought about it, the crows is an interesting dynamic within this series. I'm not saying it's good. I'm not saying it's bad. I'm just saying it's kind of middle of the road. Like, did we really need to create a separate kind of security force entity within Gotham? I guess you could say yes, because of the absence of Batman within the Arrowverse, and so since Batman's not been around for a couple of years, but since the Crows, it sounds like they've been around for quite a bit. So I'm not really sure like exactly why they were formed truly. I mean, there may have been a line of dialogue somewhere from Kate's father, who of course runs the Crows, like, oh, this is why I did it, I was building the Crows. Okay, timeline wise, but did we really need to add this extra layer? Because we already have the police department within Gotham, but I guess the thinking is with so many villains and stuff, because they constantly referenced villains within this show that we just never see. We hear about them, we never see them. So I'm guessing with so many villains that the police are just kind of useless, so we need to create a separate entity called the Crows to just add more, I guess, security and protection and I guess more policing in Gotham. I get it with the amount of villains and things they have going on, but you would also think that maybe we could have just had Sophie and Kate's dad to just be a part of the police force. I guess that just wasn't good enough. We had to do something else. I don't know. I just thought it was odd, and it still is odd because I'm actually now into season 2 rewatching up to a point where I actually stopped watching the show live, and now I think I am past the point of my rewatch. Now it's fully just seeing brand new stuff within season 2 of Batwoman moving forward. It's just a weird choice to go, Crows, let's create a new thing. We don't care about the police department. Like, they're null and void. Who gives a crap? You just, no. They had to just create something else, I guess. This show got a lot of flack for its marketing, of course, the trailers, and just certain things they were showing that really turned people off. The marketing for Batwoman Season 1, leading up to the premiere at least, was not great. There were certain things that they were trying to do that turned a lot of people off, certain moments of dialogue that were still within the show. But I wish they would have actually marketed the show a little bit better. Then again, I don't think it would have actually really mattered at the end of the day, because there were a lot of people that were against the show regardless of how good or how bad the marketing was going to be. So it had an uphill battle to face. And unfortunately, Batwoman Season 1 didn't deliver on things they could have easily accomplished, or just in general give us some better storylines to follow. Because the only really good storyline truly is the Beth Kane storyline and the arc that we go through and see with Alice and, of course, Kate Kane. Other than that, the storylines are kind of middle of the road, or they're passable at best, but they never hit potential greatness that we could have easily seen within the show. And unfortunately, it comes down to the writing not being on par with other CW shows like Arrowverse-wise that started off strong and then kind of fell from there. Think about Arrow Season 1 and Flash Season 1. Specifically those seasons. We're not talking about Season 2 and no, just the first season of The Flash and Arrow. Think about the quality of those seasons. Think about how compelling the characters were, how interested and how invested you were with those two shows specifically and what they were doing with the characters, and how you just wanted to keep watching each week. Batwoman Season 1 didn't really have that. The only real thing that really sold me to keep watching was the fact that we're getting a Batman, even though it's Batwoman, a Gotham-esque kind of show within the Arrowverse. Something I've been asking for years. From somebody who has been very critical about the Arrowverse. Okay, I always have to say that because there are people that just assume I just love and basically give no critiques or anything to the Arrowverse, when that's never been the case. I've always critiqued a lot of things about the Arrowverse. But as someone who has been a fan of the Arrowverse and will defend the good things, not the bad things, I've always been saying, where's Gotham? Like, are we gonna ever? And we finally get the Elseworlds crossover with Gotham, with Kate Kane as Batwoman in the mix, and now we have this show. This show has the potential to be so much better, and it drops the ball on a lot of things. The dialogue isn't that great. There's a lot of storylines that are just not working, and you have a lead, Ruby Rose, that I just feel like she's not really putting her whole effort into it. Now, she may disagree with that, and she probably would disagree with that, because she has defended herself after everything that kind of happened when she left the show, based on what exactly happened in terms of why she exited the show. She had a lot of things come out afterwards in terms of what really went down, emails being sent, she was forced to work due to injuries, all of that. But I always wondered if we had gotten somebody else to play Kate Kane within the Arrowverse in the Elseworlds crossover than leading into the show, how would it have been different if we had someone else in the role? And you may say, and I get this point, it wouldn't really matter that much because the writing is really truly the biggest issue here. And I understand, because trust me, the writing is not great on Batwoman Season 1. There are certain sparks of like, ooh, that was actually pretty solid, or okay, that actually wasn't half bad. But then there's a lot of times where they're dropping the ball, or it's just not good. And so maybe someone else in the role of Kate Kane would not have really affected it. But maybe the performance would have elevated certain things to being a little bit better. But that's pretty much just the assumption. Batwoman Season 1 tried. It delivered on a few things that worked in terms of, I guess, Kate Kane in a sense. Alice is the highlight. Mary and Luke are definitely some really highlights as well. And there are certain moments between Kate and Alice that I think really work. Because there's a lot of times where it's kind of muddying the water in terms of the dynamic and the constant changing of, they want to take each other out. They don't want to do it, now they do. The back and forth kind of muddies it a little bit. But there are certain things that work. But if I'm just going in as somebody who wants to see like a huge variety of storylines, some interesting villains besides Alice, and just actual good storytelling, like in terms of good arcs and moments that really surprise me and make me invested and want to keep watching specifically for more than just a handful of things. Unfortunately, you're not getting it with Batwoman Season 1. And it's unfortunate because the potential is there. but they just don't deliver on it. It's really unfortunate. Overall, Batwoman Season 1 was an interesting rewatch for sure. Would I do it again? No, but I can at least say, hey, I watched Season 1 and it's still kind of in the same position that it was initially. If I had to give it a rating out of 5 stars, 5 stars being like a masterpiece of a TV show, I'm really in the range of like 2.5. And 2.5 I think is being a little bit generous. But there are certain moments that I think elevate it to that point. But when you look at a lot of the other stuff that just doesn't work for me, just, I don't know. I think 2.5 around there is a pretty safe bet. So, yeah. So, Batwoman Season 1. You tried. I gave it a shot for another rewatch, and yeah. Oh well.